السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. الحمد لله حمدا كثيرا طيبا مباركا فيه كما يحب ربنا ويرضى. وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. أما بعد. Alhamdulillah, thank you guys for joining me this morning for another car conversation centered around the topic of divorce. As I said to you guys before, for the duration of the month of October as well as into November, inshallah ta'ala, I will be speaking extensively about divorce. So in the last discussion, we talked about men divorcing and the immaturity that comes with a lot of men who resort to divorce before taking, other steps. Now I want to take a look at the opposite side of that, and that is divorce from women. The last conversation that we had before I ended my live, someone said, what if a sister asks for a khula, which is an annulment of the marriage, a dissolution of the marriage, for husband and wife to come to an agreement that the marriage is not working. However, it is initiated by the woman. And she asked for a khula and the husband denies her this haqq. And my statement was that man does not have a right to deny her that. So I want to take a look at a statement from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This hadith, was collected in the Sunan of Imam at-Tirmidhi, where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, أيما امرأة سألت زوجها طلاقها من في غير ما بأس فحرام عليها رائحة الجنة. The Prophet ﷺ said, any woman, أيما امرأة, any woman who asks her husband for a divorce, في غير ما بأس, for no legitimate reason. No legitimate reason. Legitimate reason according to Islam. And we'll talk about what constitutes a legitimate reason for khula. And this is for the brothers to listen, because if a woman has a legitimate claim, a legitimate excuse to ask to be released from the marriage, and you deny her that, this is haram. It is haram because Islamically, she is supposed to be granted this khula, this ability to annul her marriage or dissolve her marriage, because the criteria has been met. The Prophet ﷺ said, any woman who asks her husband for a divorce, fi ghayri ma ba's, without there being a legitimate reason, فَحَرَامٌ عَلَيْهَا رَائِحَةُ الْجَنَّةِ, then it would be haram for her to smell the fragrance of paradise. And in another hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, وَإِنَّ رِيحَهَا, and indeed the fragrance of Jannah, لَتُوجَدْ مِن مَسِيرَةِ أَرْبَعِينَ سَنَةً, that the fragrance of Jannah can be smelled from a distance of 40 years. If you were traveling in a car, driving for 40 years in that vehicle, that's the distance from which you can smell the fragrance of paradise. So if a woman asks her husband for a divorce without a legitimate reason, then she will not be able to smell the fragrance of paradise, which can be smelled from a distance of 40 years. That's serious. So let's talk about what constitutes a legitimate reason. You guys ready? And sisters, I want you to listen as well, because this hadith is directed towards you. But I also want the men to understand that if a woman comes to you, your wife comes to you and she has a legitimate request to be released from the marriage, you don't have a right to deny her that. You don't have a right to deny her that. The scholars say the first reason that makes her claim or her request for khula is what's called a khula. The first reason that would make it legitimate is number one, إذا كرهت خلقه يعني أخلاقه. Can I give the explanation from a sheikh? What do you think? Where you think I'm pulling the explanation from? Where you think I'm giving the explanation from? From myself? Can I give an explanation from a sheikh? You might want to jump on somebody else's live, man. Please. Please. Anytime I'm giving an explanation, that explanation is coming from the books of scholars. This is not stuff that I made up on my own. I don't jump on a live and just start talking. I have studied Islam in a Islamic university. I have a degree for studying Islam, okay? I'm not just somebody who just opens up a live and just starts talking randomly about Islam. Every word that comes out of my mouth is calculated. You understand? This is not me just making it up as I go along. I don't have to do that. I have a degree. I actually studied Islam. La ilaha illallah. And it's sad that you guys most people don't know how to distinguish someone who has actually studied Islam from somebody who's just talking. If you can't distinguish that, then you probably need to go back to the basics. So from the reasons, as I said, the scholars say, the scholars said, I don't have to give you the exact scholar who said it. No, I'm not giving you the exact name of the sheikh who said it. Go back and study for yourself. It's not my job. I'm not a reference. That's not my job. That's your job. I'm going to sit here and give you this sheikh said, this sheikh said, this sheikh said. This is how you become attached to personalities. And I intentionally do not mention scholars' names. I intentionally don't do that. If you notice, I'll say the scholars say, the scholars of tafsir say, this scholar said, or the scholars say. I do that intentionally because in the past we've gotten caught up. In the past we've gotten caught up with worshiping personalities and connecting to personality. Learn how to connect to the information, not to the person who said it. And that's a general rule. Stop connecting yourself to the personalities and connect yourself to the information. If the information is sound, is correct, it doesn't matter who said it. It doesn't matter who said it. And that's just a general rule. So, from the reasons that a woman can ask for a khula, number one, in karihat khuluquhu, yani akhlaqahu, is that she becomes displeased by something connected to his character. His character. All right? His character becomes something that makes it difficult for her to give him his rights as a wife. His character. So, for example, Surah Al-Ghadab, he becomes angry very quickly. Shidda, he's very rigid, very rough when he talks, verbally abusive, physically abusive. وَالْعِتَابَ عَلَى أَدْنَى النَّقْصِ. And, he beats up on the woman verbally for the smallest little mistakes. So she becomes displeased with his character. He's verbally abusive, verbally disrespectful, physically abusive. That is a legitimate reason that a woman can ask for a khula. She no longer feels that she can be a wife to you under these particular conditions, meaning the conditions of your character. You guys understand? Number one, his character. Number two, إذا كان نقص في الدين. If she becomes displeased with something as it relates to his practice of Islam. كترك الصلاة, like he doesn't pray. Or he doesn't pray in the masjid. tahawun fi salat al-jama'ah. Now he's very, lax when it comes to praying in congregation. He doesn't go to the masjid and pray. He doesn't pray at all. Al-fitr fi Ramadan biduni udhr. Or he breaks his fast in Ramadan without a legitimate reason. He doesn't fast in Ramadan. Al-hudur and muharramat. Or he attends places where haram goes on. Drinking, smoking. These are all things that are connected to his deen. These are all things that are connected to his deen. Guys, follow me. So the first thing is connected to his character. The second thing connected to his practice of Islam. So if a brother is not practicing Islam, that is a legitimate reason for a woman to ask for a khula. And a man does not have a right to tell her he's not going to grant her a khula. How are you not going to grant her a khula? And she's clearly telling you that the reason I don't want to be married to you is because you don't pray. You don't fast in the month of Ramadan. You drink. You smoke. You hang out with non-Muslims. These are legitimate reasons. How can you tell somebody, no, you're not going to release them from a marriage? So on top of you doing what is haram, you're going to keep a person in the relationship to continuously witness you doing what is haram. You're going to keep the person in a relationship to continue witnessing you doing what is haram. She's asking to get out of the marriage because she doesn't want to witness you go down this slippery slope. She doesn't want to be a part of that. But no, out of my ego, because of my ego and my arrogance, I'm not going to grant you a khula. I'm going to keep you in the marriage, and you're going to continue to witness me commit sin and disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's not Islam. That's not our religion. Number 3, karihat khilqatahu kal'aib or damama, that she dislikes something about how he looks physically. Maybe his physical look starts to change. She becomes disinterested, dissatisfied with the way that he looks. Maybe he put on weight. Men always like to throw that on women. Oh, she put on a little bit of weight. What about when you put on weight? What about when you put on weight? Does a woman in Islam have a right to ask to be released from a marriage because she is no longer attracted to you because you gave up on yourself physically? Absolutely. Absolutely. This is what separated Islam from the other religious doctrines out there. Islam gave Muslim women full autonomy, authority over what she likes and what she doesn't like, and validated that. In that a woman cannot be married without her consent, and a woman has the authority to request a dissolution of the marriage in the event that she becomes discontented or displeased with the way that you look or the way you practice Islam or the way that you treat her. And I believe that we are coming into Islam with Christian values, non-Muslim values. And we're superimposing that on women in our communities. Instead of giving them the autonomy, the autonomy and the authority over themselves that Islam granted them. The wife of Thabit ibn Qais, she came to the Prophet ﷺ and she said, Ya Rasulullah, inni la u'ibu ala Thabit la fi dinihi wa la fi khuluqihi. She said, O Messenger of Allah, I have no problem with my husband Thabit as it relates to his practice of the religion, nor as it relates to his character. His character, his practice of the religion, I have no problem with it. Ala ayn wa ra's. I have no issues with his character or his practice of the religion. But my issue is what? La utiquhu bughdan. I can't stand to look at him. I'm not attracted to him. I'm not attracted to him. The Prophet ﷺ didn't tell her, be patient. The Prophet didn't tell her, go back, sister, inshallah, be patient. Hopefully, as time goes on, his looks will grow on you. at some point in your life you will become attracted to him, or maybe you'll be attracted to his practice of the deen. She already made it clear that she was already pleased with the practice of the religion. That shows you that just because you are pleased with a person's practice of the religion doesn't mean that their looks are somehow going to change. You understand? People tell people all the time, oh, just stick it out, be patient, you'll grow to love him or you'll grow to love her. You know, both with the brothers and the sisters, this is delusional thinking. You are either attracted to the person or you are not attracted to the person. Bottom line. That is not going to grow on you over time. Be honest with yourself. Which is why there are many hadith where a man comes to the Prophet ﷺ and says that he's intended or he's looking to get married, and the Prophet ﷺ asked the man, well, did you see her? And if he denies her request, what are the next steps? We'll get to that. We'll get to that. And we talked about that in the last discussion. You should have a wali. You should have a man in your family. A man in your family, the imam of the masjid, the wali who married you, the guardian who married you. The problem that the sisters make is twofold. They court with a brother throughout the entire premarital process. They court with this brother, no wali, no third party, no nothing. Then when they're ready to get married, she reaches out to the nearest imam or the closest imam and says, oh, I'm ready to get married. Can you marry me to this brother? The imam marries you to the brother. He doesn't want you guys to commit sin. He marries you and you go about your life. Then when you start to experience problems in your marriage, you have nobody to run to. You have nobody to go to because you courted with the brother the entire period of your premarital process without there being a wali involved. You understand? Stop doing that. You have to understand, men are smart. Men are smart. They know when they're courting with you and there's no wali, no imam, no brother, no man figure in your life during that process, they know what they can get away with. And so now we end up asking questions like this, like, well, if the brother denies the khula, then what should she do then? What did you do when you were courting with him when there was no wali involved? Because you didn't need an imam then. You didn't need a wali then. You were grown. You don't need no third party. You don't need a chaperone because you're grown. Until you get in a sticky situation where you want out of the marriage and the brother's not releasing you from the marriage. Now you need an imam. Now you need a wali. Now you need a student of knowledge. Now you reaching out to anybody that you can reach out to asking for help. But you didn't need any help when you were courting with the brother in any way you wanted to court with him. There's no shortage of walis. There is no shortage of walis. Even if you don't have a man in your family, there is no shortage of walis. I talked about that in the last discussion that we had. There is no shortage of walis. We have gotten to the point in the Muslim community that we do us. We do what we want to do. And when that backfires, then we're blaming Islam, we're blaming brothers, we're blaming sisters, when in fact, you should be blaming yourself. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, "Man wajada khayran falyahmadillah, wa man wajada ghayra dhalika fala yalumanna illa nafsa." That whoever finds good, then let him praise Allah, and whoever finds other than that, then let him blame nobody but himself. Whoever finds good, then let him praise Allah. Whoever finds other than that, then let them blame nobody but themselves. Imam al-Shafi'i said in a line of poetry, "Nu'ibu zamanana wal-aibu fina. Ma li zamanina aibun siwana." That we find fault with the time that we live in, but the only fault is us. We find fault with the time that we live in, and the only fault is with us. Yeah. So the wife of Thabit ibn Qais, she comes to the Prophet ﷺ and she said, I have no problem with Thabit as it relates to his practice of the religion, nor as it relates to his character. But I have no interest in him. I find it difficult to look at him. The Prophet ﷺ didn't tell the woman to be patient. He didn't tell the woman to go home. He said, can you give him back what he gave you as a dowry? Aturadina alayhi hadiqatuhu. Can you give him back what he gave you as a dowry? And she said, yes. She said, as a matter of fact, was ziyada, I can give him back more than what he gave me. I can give him back his dowry and some. That's how bad she wanted out of the relationship. And the Prophet ﷺ went to Thabit and said, Ya Thabit, اقبل الحديقة وطلقها تطليقة. Thabit, take your garden back that you gave her as a dowry and let her go from the marriage. There was no debate with that. There was no debate with that. A man doesn't have a right to deny the woman the khulab if she has a legitimate reason. The Prophet ﷺ didn't dispute with that. If a woman is no longer attracted to you, how are you keeping somebody in a relationship with you that is no longer attracted to you? That is telling you that I have no desire to be with you. So the list of reasons that make the request for khula legitimate is: number one, she dislikes his character. And that is because his character is abusive in some way, extreme in some way, shape, form, or fashion. He becomes extremely angry. He becomes irate. He becomes verbally abusive. Number two is that there is some deficiency in his practice of the religion. He's not praying. He doesn't fast in the month of Ramadan. He engages in things that are haram. Number three, she dislikes the way that he looks. She's no longer attracted to him. Number four, إذا منعها حقها من النفقة أو الكسوة أو الحاجات أو الضروريات وهو قادر عليها. Number four, from the reasons that makes the woman's request for khula legitimate, is that he denies her haqq al-maliyah. He denies her monetary rights. In Islam, the Muslim woman as a wife, she has two types of rights. She has two categories of rights. She has al-huquq al-adiyah. She has the normal rights that a woman is given of living with her in kindness, being respectful, protecting her. And then she has huquq al-maliyah. She has monetary rights. She has monetary rights. And these things are not necessarily negotiable. I mean, they are negotiable once the two people get involved in a relationship, but he has to come in knowing that there is a financial responsibility associated with marriage. You understand? You don't get to just marry a woman and just slide by. You don't get to just marry a Muslim woman and you have no financial responsibility. She has huquq maliyah. She has monetary rights. She has the right to inheritance. She has a right to provision, a nafaqah. She has a right to, food, shelter, clothing. Those are all monetary rights. Those are the baseline monetary rights that is due upon every Muslim wife. You don't get to come in and decide what you're going to pay and what you're not going to pay. There are baseline, bare minimum monetary rights that you are responsible for, and then other things that can be negotiated. But those things, food, clothing, shelter, provision, those things are non-negotiable. Those things are non-negotiable. So if the man is denying her haqq al-maliyah, denying her right to, be provided for, be provided a home, being provided clothing, being provided food, while he has the ability to provide those things for her. He's denying her rights while he has the ability to give it to her. In this case, her request for khula should be granted. Because if we were in front of a Muslim judge, the Muslim judge would look at these things, look at her request, look and see if her request is legitimate. And if it's legitimate, then he would provide what's called a fes. He would annul the marriage. He would annul the marriage, and there's nothing that you can do about that as a man. The Muslim judge would separate you from your wife, and there's nothing that you could do about it. Number five, from the reasons that makes the woman's request for khula legitimate, إذا لم يعطيها حقها من المعاشرة معاشرة أو العيب يمنع القدرة على الوطء, is that the woman is denied her right of the man living with her in kindness. And part of living with the woman in kindness is, satisfying her sexually. Living with her in kindness, part of that is sexual intimacy. If the man is no longer able to satisfy his wife sexually, he's impotent, or for whatever reason engaging in other affairs that doesn't allow him to give his wife her rights, she can request a khula. If the woman is not being satisfied sexually, you're not living with her in kindness, meaning that you're not a kind person to her, you're not emotionally available for her, she's constantly asking for your emotional availability, for you to be present, and you just simply don't have the ability to provide that to her, then her request for a khula is legitimate. Her request is legitimate. Or in the case of polygyny, if the man is not being fair between the time that he's spending with his wives, you stay over there with that wife for 3-4 days, and then you only see me once a week. You only see this wife once a week. You only see her once a month or twice a month. Meanwhile, you spend, majority of the other time with your other wife, and that's not something that you guys agreed upon. Now, if you agreed upon that, that's something different. If that was the arrangement that you guys agreed upon, then la bets, there's no problem. But if that is not something that you guys agreed upon, you agreed to, and he's staying with this wife for 4, 5, 6, 7 days out of the week, he spends 1 day with you, that's unfairness. Her request for khula is legitimate. If she says, brother, under these particular circumstances, I cannot be a wife to you. I can't give you your haqq. I can't give you your rights as a husband. You have to let me go. You spend 5 nights, 6 nights, 7 nights with one wife, and I see you once every 2 weeks. I didn't agree to that. That's not something that I agreed to. And it's not something that I want to be a part of. It's not something that I want to be a part of. The oppressive behavior is at an all-time high because women will not sit down and learn their deen. You guys won't sit down and learn your deen. Even while I'm talking and I'm explaining things, I still see people asking questions, and I'm just like, I just explained that. I just literally just explained that, and you're still asking me questions about something that I just explained. And the sad part about it is that I got to go live while I'm sitting here trying to drink my coffee and enjoy my morning. I got to take the opportunity to go live and catch you when I can catch you, because you guys spend so much time on social media inundated with the nonsense that go on social media. And then when somebody try to teach you your deen, mentally you're not in a place to be receptive. If you spend all day long scrolling on social media, laughing, giggling, everything is a joke, everything is funny, everything is entertainment, And then when you come to a page like this where somebody is trying to educate you, you can't be receptive because you're not operating in that space. You're not operating in that space. Here I am trying to teach you something, and after I already explained it, you're still sending questions. Well, what about this? Or what about that? It's just like, and that's why the oppressive behavior continues. Oppression is a direct connection to ignorance. Wherever you find ignorance, you will find oppressive. You will find oppression. There is a direct correlation between ignorance and oppression. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّا أَرَضْنَا الْأَمَانَةَ عَلَى السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَالْجِبَالِ فَأَبَيْنَ أَن يَحْمِلْنَهَا وَأَشْفَقْنَ مِنْهَا وَحَمَلَهَا الْإِنسَانُ إِنَّهُ كَانَ ظَلُومًا جَهُولًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, we offered the trust of free will to the heavens, the earth, and the mountains, and they all refused. They considered it a heavy burden to be responsible for our own free will. They considered it a burden. فَأَشْفَقْنَ مِنْهَا. And the human being said, I'll take it. وَحَمَلَهَا الْإِنسَانُ. The human being said, I'll take it. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at the end of the ayah said, إِنَّهُ كَانَ ظَلُومًا جَهُولًا. He was ignorant and oppressive. There is no coincidence that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned ignorance and oppression in the same ayah. That's the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described the human being. إِنَّهُ كَانَ ظَلُومًا جَهُولًا. He was ignorant and oppressive. Wherever you find oppression, it is as a result of ignorance. So when you talk about brothers being oppressive in marriages and in these relationships, it is a result of ignorance, not just on the part of the man, on the part of the woman. Because if she was smarter, it would be reflected in the choices that she makes in men. If you were smarter, you don't find a woman who is smart when it comes to her deen suffering under the oppression of an ignorant husband, because her choices are reflected in her knowledge of the deen. Any sister in our community that is experiencing oppression in her marriage, it's as a result of ignorance, not as a result of knowledge. Any sister that is knowledgeable of her deen is not experiencing oppression in her marriage, because her choice in man is reflected in her knowledge of the deen. Her choice of man is reflected in her knowledge of the deen. I'll give you an example. One of the scholars of the Tabi'un, one of the great scholars of hadith, he married his daughter to one of his students. And so after they consummated the marriage, the next morning, the husband got up and started putting his clothes on. She asked him, "Where are you going?" "Where are you going?" He said, "I'm going to the dars, the lesson of your father. I'm going to the lesson of your father. I'm going to sit with your father and learn from him." And his daughter said, "Ijlis, sit down. Inni u'alimuka ilm as-sa'id." She said, "I will teach you the knowledge of my father. You don't have to go and learn from my father no more. I have the knowledge of my father. You married his daughter. You can learn from me now. You don't have to go sit with my father." This is a woman who knows her deen. This is a woman who knows her religion. See, the problem with many sisters is that knowledge of the religion is not important until it's important. Sisters, I'm saying this out of love. for you guys. I'm saying this out of love. Honestly, I'm not beating you up. There's no need to say, well, this is why the brothers are, because y'all don't listen to anybody. Y'all don't listen to anybody. So we got to force feed you the information so you can listen, because you don't listen to anybody. You guys don't listen to anybody. Here go another brother trying to tell us what, but when we bring sisters and sisters try to tell you, you tear her apart. Who she study with, where she study, you know, who the sister. It's just like, so the only other way to give you the information is to force feed it to you from a brother. She said, Ijlis, sit down. Inni u'allimuka ilm Sa'id. She said, I'll teach you the knowledge of Sa'id. I'll teach you the knowledge of my father. You don't need to go sit in my father's lesson anymore. You married me. You married his daughter. All of the knowledge that you were going to learn from my father, you can get from me. That's a woman who knows her deen. And that is reflected in the choices that she make in men. No sister who has knowledge of her deen, values her religion, and has knowledge of her religion is suffering under the oppression of an ignorant husband. You understand? No woman who values her religion, has knowledge of her religion, is suffering under the oppression of an ignorant man. Because if you are suffering oppression in your relationship, it's because the man that you are married to is ignorant. Even if he has information about the religion, knowledge does not become knowledge until you learn it and act on it. Until then, it's just information. Until then, it's just information. It becomes ilm nafi', it becomes beneficial knowledge when you learn it and you practice it. Then it becomes beneficial knowledge. It's beneficial because you learned it and you acted upon it. Until then, it's just information. Any ignoramus out here could have some information about the deen. Any ignorant person out here can have some information about Islam. That doesn't mean that they're knowledgeable. Understand the difference between the two. So anytime a woman's request meets any one of these 5 conditions, then her request for khula should be granted. And to not grant her the khula, even though her request falls into one of these 5 categories, the man is sinful. He's sinful. If the woman is asking for a khula and he denies her request for a khula, and her request for a khula falls into one of these 5 categories, then he is sinful for not granting the khula. Yeah. Somebody got all 5 of the categories? Post all 5 of the categories, inshallah ta'ala. Even after I close the live and I'm done, go on social media and say, I just heard a lecture. I just, got some information. I want to share that information. If a woman asks for a khula, this is for your benefit. This is for your benefit. I'm giving this information to you sisters for free. I didn't charge you for it. Balash, I'm giving it to you for free. Take the information. Imam Ahmed said, Qayyidul ilm bil kitaba. Trap your knowledge by writing it down. You just listening to a live and say, oh, mashallah, the brother gave it up. The brother, write it down. Go share it with other people. Write the information down. Go share it with other sisters. Open up an Instagram page. Open up a Facebook page. Share the information with others, so that other people can listen. Can you imagine? It might be 200, 300 people on the live. Can you imagine how many sisters haven't heard this, never heard this before? And you're going to get off the live, you're going to go on with your life, you're going to go back to work, and that's that. Meanwhile, the sisters who really need to hear this are never going to jump on social media and listen. The people who actually need to hear this are never going to hear it because they're never going to jump on my page on social media to listen to anything ilmi, anything knowledge-based. If I was on here talking about some goofy stuff, if I was on here talking about somebody's business, if I was on here gossiping, then everybody would be on the live. But I'm here talking about something that's going to save your soul, save your marriage, and we could care less. Because knowledge of the religion is only important when it's important. We are our own worst enemy and blame everybody else for our misery. We are our own worst enemy and we blame everybody else for our own misery. I have never seen a group of people ever. Never seen a group of people like African American Muslims who undervalue knowledge of the religion, leadership in the religion, and all they do is complain. All they do is complain. All the Muslim community does is complain, complain, complain. Yet we won't take time out of our lives to learn. Yet we won't take time out of our lives to share and pay zakat on what we learn to try to teach others. All we do is sit back and complain about what the brothers are doing, what the sisters ain't doing, what the imams ain't doing, what the community is not doing, yet everybody ignorant. Sad, man. Sad. You guys do realize that with all of the books of hadith, all of everything that we have of knowledge of the religion, we have access to more information than the Sahaba ever had. We have more access to information than Imam al-Bukhari, Imam Muslim, Imam al-Tirmidhi, and all of the other imams at one time. We have more access to all of the information that they had to travel for hadith. You can go to Google and get the hadith. What is our excuse? We have access to more information than any other generation in the entire history of Islam. With one click of a button, we can pull up an entire book of hadith that imams who compiled those books had to travel, sometimes on donkeys, because scholars and people of knowledge during that time didn't even have money. They didn't even have money. They had to travel on donkey from one part of the world to another part of the world just for one hadith. Right? We are accountable. To whom much is given, much is required. We are accountable. With one click of a button, we can have access to books of hadith. And these scholars had to travel from one place to another just to get one hadith. SubhanAllah. The accountability is even more. The accountability is even more, far greater. So the Prophet ﷺ said, أَيُّمَا امْرَأَةٍ سألت زوجها طلاقها في غير ما بأس. Any woman who asks her husband for a divorce without a legitimate reason, then she will not smell the fragrance of paradise. فَحَرَامٌ عَلَيْهَا رَائِحَةَ الْجَنَّةِ. It would be haram, prohibited for her to smell the fragrance of Jannah. So now we know, well, I mean, how many times have you read this hadith? Any woman who asks her husband for a divorce without a legitimate reason. How many times have you read this hadith and it crossed your mind, well, what is a legitimate reason? Because I've never heard that part before. Never heard that explained before. I always read the hadith, any woman who asks her husband for a divorce without a legitimate reason. Then what constitutes a legitimate reason? What is a legitimate reason? And the scholars, alhamdulillah, they give us categories. Rather than giving us 5 different scenarios, they give us categories that can accommodate many scenarios within one category. That's knowledge. That's hikmah. That's knowledge of the deen. That's knowledge of the deen. 5 categories. I gave them to you. Share that information with other people. It doesn't matter whether or not the request is sincere. We're looking at the request to see if it has some legitimacy. Is it legitimate? Is the request legitimate? How do we know if it's legitimate? Then we weigh it against the categories that the scholars mention. The 5 categories. Is it something related to his character? Is it something related to the way that he looks? Is it something related to the way that he practices the religion? Is it something related to the way that he is able to give her her rights? Is it something related to, her financial maintenance? These are the 5 categories. If it falls into one of those 5 categories, it's a legitimate request. Now, if the woman is asking for a khula to get out of the marriage for personal reasons because she has some other agenda, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that decides that. Where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned in another hadith, he said, al-mukhtali'at munafiqat. Sisters, I want you to listen to this. Al-mukhtali'at munafiqat. The woman who seeks a khula without a legitimate reason is a munafiq, is a hypocrite. Why did he say that she's a hypocrite? What's hypocritical about her? I want to see if you guys can catch it. Something that I do with my students in class. I leave it open-ended because I want to challenge you. The woman who asks for a khula without a legitimate reason is a munafiq, is a hypocrite. She's showing signs of hypocrisy. What about asking for a khula without a legitimate reason makes her a hypocrite? Let me see if someone can make the connection for us. What about that makes her a hypocrite? She don't fear Allah? No. People who don't fear Allah are not hypocrites. Just makes them people who don't fear Allah. What is a hypocrite? Go back to the word hypocrite. What is a hypocrite? Someone who gives an outward appearance, but the inside is something else. The person is duplicitous. She broke the agreement? No. She's lying to get the khula, right? She's asking for a khula using one of the 5 categories, but she doesn't really want the khula for any of those reasons. She has her own personal reasons. She's two-faced. She's deceitful. She's deceitful. What about the freed lady that divorced her slave husband? What about her? She did not want to be married to a man who was a slave. He didn't want to free himself. He became content with being a slave. She purchased her freedom, and she no longer wanted to be married. Like, how do I purchase my freedom before you? We had the same opportunity. You understand? It's like two people who get married and they're both broke, struggling financially. One aspires to do better in life, goes to school, gets a degree, gets a good job, and begins to, work themselves out of the hole, while the other one sit around playing video games all day, sit around on social media, shopping all day long, and one decides, this is not working for me anymore. She didn't do anything wrong. She just said, I don't want to, I'm free now. I purchased my freedom. I found a way to get free. You're still a slave. I don't want to be married to a person who's a slave. That hadith has nothing to do with what I'm talking about. That hadith has nothing to do with what I'm talking about. The Prophet ﷺ said, Al-Mukhtari'at munafiqat. The woman who seeks a khula without a legitimate reason, because if she's not using the legitimate reasons according to Islam, she has another agenda. So she's asking for a khula, making it seem like the husband is the problem, when in fact she has another agenda. And women have to be mindful. You ask your, and I mean, I don't really see this to be a big issue in the Muslim community, to be honest with you. In non-Muslim society, the vast majority of the divorces are initiated by women. In the Muslim community, it's the total opposite. The vast majority of the divorces in the Muslim community are initiated by the men. You see how that works? Our situation is completely different. According to non-Muslim statistics, majority of the divorces amongst non-Muslims are initiated by women. In the Muslim community, the majority of the divorces in the Muslim community are initiated by men. Muslim women don't have the luxury to jump in and out of relationships. Muslim women don't want to jump in and out of relationships. Most Muslim women, from my limited experience over the past 20 years, in my limited experience, most Muslim women, when they get married, they don't want to be divorced. The last thing that they want is divorce. I've seen Muslim women be patient with stuff that non-Muslim women would never be patient with. So when we talk about divorces being initiated within the Muslim community, that initiation comes from the men. And that's a whole nother conversation. I was on Brother Hassan Clay's podcast last night. We had a talk about divorce. If you guys haven't tapped in with Hassan Clay and his podcast, go over to Hassan Clay's. I'm forgetting the name of it. If someone remembers the name of it, post the name of his podcast. But we had a podcast. We had a discussion yesterday about divorce and about immaturity amongst men, because his concentration is on men. So it's not like we beating up on men, but the conversation is about men and the immaturity and the lack of responsibility. And there were a lot of things that we discussed. And one of the things we did discuss was the high rates of divorce that are initiated by the men. That is in the African American community. I beg to differ. In the Arab and Indo-Pak South Asian community, is even worse. Those women are not asking for divorces at higher rates than the men are asking for divorces. Kidding me? That is not particular to African Americans. But when I'm speaking to majority African American Muslim community. But if we went to the Arab community, or we went to the South Asian community, that's Indo-Pak, that's Indian, Pakistani, Bangladeshi, all of those communities, Afghani, the same still applies even in those communities as well. The vast majority of the divorces that are initiated in those communities are initiated by men. That's in the Muslim community in general. That is not just particular to African Americans. That is not particular to African Americans. That's the Muslim community in general, because Muslim women don't usually get into a marriage to get divorced. We take marriage far more seriously than non-Muslims do. For them, it's a show, you know, not to say all of them, but for the most part, it's the outward expression of, you know, relationships and love and things like that in a very superficial fashion. But for us, when we get married, we having children, you know, we getting in, you know, merging our lives together. It's completely different because it's based on religion. Their marriages are not necessarily based on religion, evidenced by the fact of how they court with one another before they finally do get married. We don't court with one another in that fashion before we get married. Our marriages are based upon religious mandates. So our approach to religion, our approach to marriage and relationships are completely different. But yeah, in non-Muslim society, the vast majority of the divorces are initiated by women. In the Muslim community, the vast majority of the divorces are initiated by men. As it relates to Muslim women have adopted feminism, yeah, there's some truth to that. But that didn't happen overnight. Right, you're vested and you have a higher purpose. Very good, Sister Suhaila. Very well articulated. Very good. You have a higher purpose. Your aim for marriage is higher than just being in love and being in a relationship. This is an opportunity, one of the paths that you're going to use to get to paradise. Marriage in Islam is a means to an end. It is not the end. Marriage in Islam is a means to an end, not the end. It's another path. You know how a millionaire has multiple streams of income? Someone who is aiming for paradise should have multiple streams of hasanat. Multiple streams that you're going to use to get you to paradise. And marriage is just one of those streams of income, spiritual income. Could it be because the man can have more wives, which makes some men feel women are completely disposable? I think that might have something to do with it. That's a whole nother conversation, which, thank you for that reminder. I'm going to have that conversation the next time I go live. Maybe tomorrow, maybe the day after tomorrow. I don't know. I got to kind of get in where I fit in. My mornings sometimes can be hectic. My mornings can sometimes be a little laid back. So it all depends on what I have, you know, what's going on in my morning. But that is my next conversation, as I'll rotate between, you know, discussing issues dealing with the men, and then I'll discuss issues dealing with the women. So I'll continue to rotate back and forth. So my next conversation will be, why do men feel that women, Muslim women, are disposable? Part of that reason is the option. Part of that reason is the option of, I can just take on another wife. If you're not going to act right, I'll just go get somebody else. Yeah, that has something to do with it. It's not the only reason that I believe that Muslim men, you know, feel that women are disposable. There are tons of other reasons, but inshallah ta'ala, thank you for that reminder. That will be my next discussion. All right. So, and I usually give a heads up before I go live, just to kind of give you an opportunity to, you know, get to a space where you can pull out your phone and listen. But just so you guys know, all of these conversations, I finally found a way to take these conversations off of Instagram and post them on YouTube. I found a way to do that. And so all of the conversations, the car conversations, are uploaded on my YouTube page. So if you go to my YouTube page, Shadeed Muhammad on YouTube, you will find all of these car conversations. I'm slowly but surely uploading them all. I just found a way how to pull stuff off of Instagram, upload it, download it, and then upload it to YouTube. Alhamdulillah. I'm a little older, so old-fashioned, so I'm still trying to figure social media out. But I figured this one out. So this conversation, inshallah ta'ala, I will post to my YouTube page sometime later on today, bi'ithnillah. All right. It only seems like black men like polygyny. Other communities don't practice this. Oh my gosh. I don't have time to tackle that one, man, but I got a lot to say about that one. It seems like only black men like polygyny. Whoa, let's talk about that. I'm going to make a note of that. I'm going to make note of that. It's not that black men are the only ones that like polygyny. There are a lot of Arabs that would like to practice polygyny. There are a lot that do, more so in their countries, not here in America. In their countries. In Yemen, you have large populations of Muslim men that are in polygyny. West Africa, forget about it. I'm not really sure about Palestine or Palestinians or Jordanians. That's not, or Ahl Sham in general, whether that is Syrians. They don't usually practice polygyny. But Egyptian shuyukh in Egypt, yes. Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states, you'll find it very prevalent amongst the Gulf states. We're talking about Qatar, we're talking about UAE, we're talking about Saudi Arabia, we're talking about Kuwait. The Gulf states, you'll find that the Arabs in the Gulf states, polygyny is very, very normalized in the Gulf states. And there's a reason for that. You go back and you do the history, there's a reason for that. Because they were able to kind of like preserve and hold on to their culture. Whereas when you look at the areas of Sham, you look at different parts of North Africa, all of those places have been colonized. And those places that were colonized, they took on the cultural identity of the people that colonized them, whether that was the French or the British. Yeah, but not en masse. The Palestinians, if they practice it, or Jordanians, if they practice it, it's very minimal. Very minimal. But you would have to go back and do some history. The Gulf states, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, UAE, those Gulf states, they have been they preserved their culture. So even though in many instances they were colonized to some degree, they still held on to their culture. Whereas North African, you're talking about Morocco, you're talking about Jazair, you're talking about and other places in North Africa, in the area of Asham, you're talking about Syria, Palestine, Jordan. Those places were colonized. And usually when they are colonized, they take on the cultural traditions and practices of their colonizers. And so they begin to look at religious traditions like polygyny as something that is taboo, something that is, extreme, that we don't necessarily, because they're trying to follow the cultural traditions and the modernity of, the colonizers that colonized them. That's a little deep for most people. They're not really ready to unpack that. But it's not just African Americans. We are probably a little bit more bold in America to practice it, whereas Arabs, Pakistanis that come here, they view polygyny as something that is against the law. And it's not actually against the law, believe it or not. I had Brother Hassan Abdullah from Elizabeth, who's a lawyer, who's an attorney out of Elizabeth. He deals with a lot of, marital cases amongst Muslims in the Essex County area. And I had him on the live, and he explained to everybody that practicing polygyny in America is not illegal. So for all of the people who keep saying it's illegal, since when did you become an attorney? Since when did you become, a professor of law, of American law, to tell people that it is illegal to practice polygyny? It's not illegal. So a lot of foreigners that move here from other countries, they view polygyny as something that is illegal. Not only that, a lot of foreigners, they know in their countries, there's only a certain caliber of men who practice polygyny in their cultures. It's not for everybody. So scholars, shuyukh, elderly statesmen, tribal chiefs, people of high stature in their society, they know from their society that polygyny is not for everybody. We African-American men in America, we are only people who, want to stick our toe in polygyny because we can. We don't see polygyny as something that is for a certain caliber of men, and we leave those men to practice the polygyny if they want to, whereas everybody else suffices themselves with, what is normal. We are the only people who don't get it. In Saudi society, there's a certain caliber of man that has multiple wives. That's not for everybody. The average Saudi does not have multiple wives. My next door neighbor, when I lived in Saudi Arabia, my next door neighbor had multiple wives. He was married to a Saudi woman and he was married to a Pakistani woman. And we used to have long conversations because I was just amazed at how that happened. Whole story on that one. But nonetheless, that's not for everybody. So it's not just African Americans who practice polygyny. And we talk about polygyny as if it's like some taboo issue or something that people should be ashamed of or people should be embarrassed about. It's not that either. But I gotta go. You guys are asking. You waited until the end to ask all of these great questions while I have no more time. Inshallah ta'ala, we'll Northwest Africans kept their religious practices and cultural practices to some degree. I'm not talking about West African. West Africa completely different than North African. West Africa completely different from North Africa. The way that they responded to the the invasions. Yeah, they kept on to their cultural traditions, but anybody who has been colonized takes on the culture and the traditions of their colonizers. That's just look at history. I don't have to prove that. Just look at history. Look at the African Americans. We still trying to figure it out. We still trying to figure it out. But the black community is poor. Polygyny is keeping us poor. We need money from masajid and community, not more wives. Yeah, that's a whole nother conversation. You guys are asking all of these great questions at the wrong time. But polygyny is not, first of all, the black community is not poor. We are $17 trillion people. The black community is by far not poor. There's a difference between being poor and not being financially educated so you don't know how to spend your money. We are not poor. I don't know where that came from. Right, that might be a little personal. The black community is not poor by far. We are just financially and economically illiterate. We don't know how to spend our money. But we are not poor. We haven't been properly educated on how to spend our money. And taking on another wife, let me ask you a question. If you had 3 people working, you have a husband, he works, the wife works, the other wife works, every 2 weeks between them, they're bringing, the husband, he's bringing in $1,500 to $2,000 every 2 weeks. The other wife is bringing in $1,000 to $1,500. So you got 15. Let's just round it off. Each one of them is bringing home $1,500 every 2 weeks. Right? That's almost $5,000 every 2 weeks that they're bringing in together for a total of almost 10 grand a month. If the husband is working, the wife is working, the other wife is working, Collectively, they are bringing in almost $10,000 a month. I don't think taking another wife is what's contributing to the poverty in our community. The problem is we don't know how to manage our families properly so that the money that we are bringing in is managed in a way where we're living our best life. 3 people, a husband, 2 wives, and they're all bringing about between $1,000 to $1,500 in every 2 weeks. That's 10 grand a month between the 3 of them. But their problem as a family unit is that everybody within the family unit is still operating as an individual. She makes her $1,500 every 2 weeks, and her money is her money because that's what Islam grants her, and the husband has to spend all of his money. So while she spends her money on clothes and overgarments and, car notes and, living her best life, the husband is exhausting all of his money to paying the bills to, fulfill his duty and role and responsibility as the caretaker of the family. Here again, and they're losing. Because they haven't learned how to put their heads together to say, collectively, we are bringing in 10 grand a month. They're not moving as a collective unit. You follow me? They're moving as individuals within the unit. And that's the problem. Because if they were to pull their resources together, they would be a force. Group economics. Very good, Brother Dawood. Group economics. That's called financial literacy. Financial literacy. That is what we are lacking. Polygyny doesn't make us more poor. It's remaining illiterate when it comes to how our finances work and how to make our finances work for us that keeps us poor. Because if 3 people in a relationship are bringing in 10 grand a month, that means in 10 months, they have managed to pull in $100,000. In 10 months, they pulled in $100,000. 100 grand cash that they're bringing in a 10-month period. Yeah. But because the women are, oh no, it's your responsibility. You decided to take on a second wife. You decided that you want, so now you're paying all the bills. So he's exhausting all of his money while their money goes to miscellaneous stuff, whatever it is they're doing with their money. And they're always broke. If we truly practice group economics, polygyny would be the move for our communities. But we're so jealous and so envious and so ignorant. We lead with our emotions, and that's our biggest problem as African Americans. We lead with our emotions. Every decision that we make, every move that we make is always based upon how I feel in this moment or that moment. That's our Achilles heel. That's our Achilles heel. Yeah. Allah musta'an. Jazakumullah khairan. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you all. Love coming on and having these conversations with you guys. And inshallah ta'ala, this will open the door for you guys to expand on the conversations within your within your social media circle. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you all. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to continue trading these ideas and sharing information with one another so that perhaps will spark the mind of the person who is going to at some point change the condition of our communities. Jazakumullahu khairan wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallama tasliman kathira wa subhanaka rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun ala al-mursalin walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin wa assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.